Take one of these.
I hate to interrupt all these great conversations for a Saturday morning. Thank you so much for being here. You can't hear? All right, do we need to do is that any better? Okay, I apologize. Welcome to the third and final legislative forum in a series of 3 for the Johnson County League of Women Voters. This is our last forum for this legislative session. My name is Bonnie Boothroyd. I am a member of the League. I'll be moderating, and our timekeeper today will be Maureen Bradford over on the other side of the DS, who is also a League member. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you, please, to silence your cell phones. Give everybody a minute to do. And while you're doing, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We support an informed citizen participation in government. The League does take positions after considerable study of issues and acts to influence decision makers on these issues. Membership is open to people of all genders, age 16 and older, and we invite you to join us. We can use your time, your talent, and your financial support for our ongoing operations. To learn more, please speak with one of our members here today or check our Facebook page. And I think we have some membership brochures out in the hall in case you're interested. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. Today's forum focuses on issues related to citizenship and immigration. All Johnson County legislators were invited to participate. Representatives Zabner and Driscoll have and Senator Driscoll have scheduling conflicts today, and we're not able to be here. Representatives Lawler and Hora did not respond to our invitations. So I'd like to introduce our legislators who are participating today. Our senators in order of seniority: Zach Walls, District 43, Janice Weiner, District 45, representatives in order of seniority: Dave Jacoby, District 86.
I take that as a compliment.
Sounds like no introductions necessary. Amy Nielsen, District 85, and Eleanor Levin, District 89. All good. We're going to start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually. And we'll start with Senator Walls, District 43.
Thanks, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody. I'm State Senator Zach Walls, representing District 43, which includes all of Coralville, where my wife and my son Elijah and I all live. Also includes North Liberty, where we are this morning, some Westside Iowa City neighborhoods, rural Johnson County going north and east up to the Solon area, and the town of Solon. This year, I've had the pleasure of serving on several great committees: the Commerce Committee, the Technology Committee, the Labor Committee, the Health and Human Services Committee, and the Local Government Committee. We are rapidly approaching now the second funnel, which is a key legislative deadline for legislation that is not a tax bill or a budget bill. To be alive, it has to be out of one chamber, the Senate or the House, and then it has to be through committee on the other chamber. And so we're going to be spending a lot of this week in subcommittee and committee meetings. We've been in debate for most of the last several weeks since we were all together at our last forum. And in that time, there have been a lot of very bad bills that have passed, a lot of very bad bills, both from the Senate and from the House by the majority party. There was one highlight for me in terms of good legislation that was passed, something that I've been working on the entire 7 years, as hard as it is for me to believe that I've been in the legislature, which is the hands-free bill. There have been a number of attempts over the years to get this done, to make it so that it's not legal to be on your phone while you're behind the wheel. We finally this year got a bill through both chambers, and it's now on the governor's desk. She has not signed it into law yet, but it is our expectation that she will in relatively short order. So that's something that I'm very excited about. Looking forward to the conversation today. Obviously, immigration and citizenship has been in the headlines quite a bit. And even though that's more of a federal issue, there are a lot of implications and things that are happening here in the state. So looking forward to the conversation and the discussion today. Thanks, everybody. Also, I do have a cold, so if you hear me coughing, that's why.
Thank you, Zach. Senator Weiner, District 45.
Thank you. Thank you very much for holding the forum. Thank you for sort of spreading them out around the county. My name is Janice Weiner. I am the state senator for District 45, which is most of Iowa City and University Heights. I am also the Democratic leader in the Senate right now. A lot has been happening in debate. Fortunately, as you'll hear from our colleagues in the State House, not nearly as much debate in the Senate as in the House. Which is not a bad thing, because with some exceptions like the hands-free bill, the less we debate, the fewer bad bills pass. I'm really sorry that our other colleagues aren't here today, because immigration, your topics for the day, and as your topics are every time, are incredibly important for everyone in this county, and everyone who represents a piece of this county really ought to show up for their constituents. It's really easy right now to conflate a lot of what's happening at the federal level with what's happening at the local level, and frankly, it's a very confusing situation that I think has purposely put a lot of people on edge. There haven't been any real immigration-related bills in the Senate so far, although there have been a couple in the House. The one thing that is in the Senate is a voting-related bill that would allow poll workers, that would give poll workers the ability, although they're not really qualified to do so, to ask about or check voters' immigration status. I'm not sure which of us always carry citizenship on us. So that is an issue. It's going to continue to be an issue. I think there's a similar bill on the House side, and that's something that we're likely to see one way or the other on the floor. We continue to hope that our Republican colleagues will do some positive things to help Iowans with opportunity, to help move them ahead, to help lower costs. But the only things that happened this past week were taking opportunity away from kids to eat on the House side, potentially taking opportunity away from at least 181,000 Iowans who are currently on Medicaid expansion and who would be at risk from losing their health care, which would also have a huge impact on rural communities and rural hospitals and some urban hospitals. And it is astounding to see what their priorities are and what their priorities are not, because we still have not passed school funding. We're over 6 weeks late on that. So if you have a message for other folks, if you live in districts of Representative Lawler or Hora or Senator Driscoll, please let them know that it's way past time to pass school supplemental aid.
Thank you. Representative Jacoby.
Going in seniority.
We're
Going in seniority, yes.
I'm not used to that. Even at home, I go last. And it's good to see the young Walls, the young man here. What a good-looking young guy with a real nice head of hair. I must say I noticed that. This year, I'm serving as ranking member on Ways and Means, on government oversight. A new committee, which I'm serving on this year, is higher education. I could rename it, but I can't say it on TV. And then also natural resources. It's been an interesting year. And again, I know it's been said, it is completely sad that our Republican friends cannot show up for a single darn forum. The number of important topics and issues that are on the table, they really should be able to be here, answer the questions, the same questions that we're going to answer, and offer whatever their perspective is. I will let you know that I've offered to come to their forums. They have closed door forums, and I have even offered to go up to Northwest Iowa with John Wills and have forums in Spencer, Iowa. He said, oh, but I don't want you to drive 6 hours. And I said, ooh, but I want to drive 6 hours. I would love to come up for the forums. So it is kind of sad that you're not hearing the totality of all of the issues we're dealing with. But I want to thank you so much for being here today. I kind of feel disjointed since we're sitting up. This is pretty fancy. I hereby say I'm going to run for North Liberty City Council because this is pretty fancy. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you, and I look forward to your questions today, both on issues that are of concern to you and also issues that may not touch you directly, but you fear for other people, and that's like our family. Both my daughters graduated from West High School with people that were students that were dreamers. And when you look at the fear in their eyes, I tell you, I vacillate from tearing up myself and getting pretty gosh darn angry, because these are young people that came here when they were infants, and now they just don't know what's going to happen next.
Thank you. Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. Thank you to the League for having us again, and thank you so much for coming to North Liberty. Welcome to my hometown. I did not get to enjoy this rather fancy city hall when I was mayor, but I did a lot of work there nonetheless. As a reminder, I serve as the ranking member on state government. I'm also on natural resources, and I'm on appropriations for the first time this year, which has been really, really interesting. We have been sitting in debate a lot over on the House side. I think we did an 11.5-hour day on Wednesday. Yeah, those are rough. And we do a lot of sit around and wait kind of stuff. So this time of year in the legislature is very frustrating for all of us for a lot of different reasons. But I can't think of anything that hasn't already been said, so I will just say I'm looking forward to hearing from you today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Representative Levin.
Thank you. Eleanor Levin, I represent Iowa House District 89. That's south and west sides of Iowa City, right up to Mormon Track, and one neighborhood on the other side of Mormon Track. And I have University Heights residential as well. I serve as a ranking member on government oversight. I serve on our natural resources committee, our public safety committee, our veterans affairs committee. I'm forgetting something, but and then education. Well, there's something else I'm forgetting, and then education and both policy and budget. And adding the education policy committee to my committee list this year was something that was really important to me. And that's where this past couple of weeks, we've actually had a few small wins. We've seen some bad bills not moving forward that from, something that's a really technical bill, but that would mess with our teacher pay. Trying to separate out funds that can't really be separated out and take them away from the teachers who are supposed to be getting those funds and sending them to charter schools. And then some of the other bills that we haven't seen moving forward, getting put on debate calendars, but then pulled back at the last minute. Bills that endanger libraries, bills that would strip a lot of regulation away from homeschool settings, things like that. We did also see a bill pass the House this week that I fought really hard against, and it ended up passing the House with strong bipartisan opposition and only partisan support. And that's the bill that would allow school districts to employ or engage volunteers, chaplains, religious chaplains in our schools. And I think the debate around that one was really kind of eye-opening to me. The comments about the idea that religion is already being pushed in our public schools because secular humanism is apparently the religion of our schools. And I just couldn't say more strongly how dangerous I felt this proposal is. It takes away any ability to require certification, training, et cetera, from those individuals. It takes away any parental consent rules around around having a child meet with a chaplain. It doesn't have any controls around evangelizing or proselytizing to children by these individuals. it really genuinely terrifies me. And so that's one where it is now sitting in the Senate. It only has a week to pass committee in the Senate. And so if you want to reach out to your senators, other than those who are here, and let them know that that is something that would concern you, that would be really helpful. Personally, on the immigration and citizenship conversation, it is so frustrating to me to see such a federal issue being conflated and confused in people's minds. We have an AG who is suing a state sheriff for refusing to follow unconstitutional ICE orders. We have bills that would impact immigration enforcement in the state where that really is not our place. So I'm glad we're having this. Appreciate all your questions today.
Thank you for all your legislative updates. We appreciate that. At this time, we're going to begin with questions. We'll start with one from the League, and then following legislators' responses to the League question, we will ask invited groups to pose their questions, and then finally, audience members who are not representing groups will be invited to ask your questions. Here's the protocol that we're going to follow. When the floor is opened up for questions, audience members will be asked to line up at the microphone. Please identify yourself and, if applicable, the organization that you're representing. We'd like to have you limit your question to 1 minute, please, so that legislators can address as many questions as possible. If you have a translator with you today, we'll allow a little bit more time than just that 1 minute for you to ask that question. And then finally, if you have more than one question, we'd like to ask you to ask that question and then move to the back of the line to ask your second question, so everybody will get a chance to ask at least one question first. Legislators, what we would like to ask of you is that you limit your responses to 2 minutes. And you are all welcome, but not expected to chime in on any question that you would like to speak to. Here is the League question. What solutions can you envision for any aspect of the issues surrounding immigration, citizenship, and voting rights for new citizens in Iowa? Want me to say that again? What solutions can you envision for any aspect of the issues surrounding immigration, citizenship, and voting rights for new citizens in Iowa?
I think one of the first things we need to look at is how difficult it is to get an ID in the state. A little bit off topic, but it still is a little parallel. The group reentry, where they do the facilitations of letting you live out the scenario of coming out of jail and trying to reintegrate back into society. Like one of the things that we find, I mean, just right off the bat, the first thing you have to do is get an ID. You don't get one. And that's incredibly hard because maybe you don't have a way to get to the DMV. Now they take appointments. And I know in Polk County, we heard this year that it's over 2 weeks of a wait. Maybe you can't get to one of the other counties that is less of a wait. Maybe you don't have all of your documents. I think that would be probably especially a problem for people coming in looking for citizenship. But making it easier for people to get an ID, I think would be top of the list, top 3 probably, at least for me, to help people in the state.
I'm frankly really concerned about the voting aspect. Once someone is a citizen, they have the right to register to vote, and I encourage every new citizen and every citizen to register to vote. The question is now, once they are registered to vote, what is going to happen potentially at the polls or anywhere along the road there. I personally do not believe that people should be forced to carry citizenship documents with them. My concern is that both what the Secretary of State did last fall, what he's continuing to do, what the legislation would do, is intended to have a chilling effect on voting, on particularly on Black and brown people voting, new citizens voting, and anything we can do in terms of getting out information in a variety of languages, and helping people understand their rights is going to be really important, because I do not want anyone to be intimidated from exercising the right to vote that they have as a U.S. citizen.
I think we need to ensure the accuracy of the systems we're using. I just had the opportunity to learn about a young woman who last week became a citizenship after 12 years here in Iowa. And she's a new college student, and she got a driver's license a couple of years ago, right? Because she was old enough to drive. And so when someone goes to the DOT to get a driver's license and they are not yet a citizen, they say that, right? The question is on the form and they say it and they're honest. But then that should not be held against them when they are registering to vote years later after they become a citizen. That's not the right place to be looking at that data. And that's the data that our Secretary of State was looking at this past fall when he tried to disenfranchise thousands of Iowa voters. And I want to thank, I know some of the folks in this room were among those working to make sure that those folks knew that their votes were being challenged and had the opportunity to go and make sure that their votes were counted. And I want to thank those in this room. I've also had the opportunity to go with the league to register voters at immigration ceremonies at Herbert Hoover. And that's such a powerful experience. And again, so many of those folks, we're looking at adults. We're looking at folks who have been driving in Iowa. And those are the same people who then have, in their past, somewhere in their history, told the DOT, no, I am not a citizen. I am here as a legal resident. And so that data is not the correct source to be looking at. So just looking at those data sources.
If I could add just very quickly that there is a data source to which the Secretary of State has access. It's through the Department of Homeland Security in Washington. It's called SAVE. He has access to it through signing a memorandum of understanding, which I believe he had not done last fall. So all of that could have been avoided by signing that memorandum of understanding, and he would have known within seconds of entering, identifying data or number, like if you're a green card holder, he would have known that they were now citizens and not created that sense of doubt.
So, I mean, first and foremost, this is an important issue. You're talking about voting, which is a sacred right for every citizen in the state and in this country. It is really important that we make sure that the only people who are voting in our elections are the people who are eligible to vote. I think the fundamental problem with the way that Secretary Pate went about it was that if his primary concern was in upholding the right of every Iowan to cast their ballot who was constitutionally and legally allowed to do so, he would have started the process 6 months before the election instead of 6 days before the election. I mean, that was the fundamental problem, was that in the last week, essentially, before the election, he's challenging essentially over 2,000 Iowans' ability to vote, of which I think 34 wound up casting ballots illegally. I don't think that there's any evidence yet that affected the outcome of any elections, but we had a state Senate race that was decided by 29 votes in the Des Moines metro area. We had a congressional race in this part of the state a couple of years ago that was decided by 6 votes. So we do know that is an important issue, but the way that Secretary Pate went about it created huge amounts of confusion for eligible voters. I see we have several folks from our county government here today. It created enormous stress on our county election workers who already have a very difficult job, especially in a very high stakes political environment. And I think it created a lot of confusion among voters who were constitutionally allowed to cast a ballot, who had their votes were challenged, and that was, I think, the fundamental problem. Again, I don't necessarily have an issue with Secretary Pate trying to ensure that people who are legally and constitutionally eligible to vote are the ones casting their ballots. The problem was with how he went about doing it, which certainly seemed from the outside like it was about more fear-mongering and scaring Iowa voters who are constitutionally and legally registered to vote, rather than actually trying to address the fundamental problem, which is something that I think we should all be able to agree on.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you check the list of voters that were purged, there weren't a lot with the last name of Smith. But back to immigration and what's going on in the country and in the state and in our counties and in our cities. Obviously, the enforcement lines are terribly blurred. The methods are more than questionable, and the outcomes have yet to be determined for many people. And people being snatched up on a college campus and moved 7 states away. I don't know if that's enforcement or if that's more of the intimidation and fear that the current administration insists on using for their policy. Our sheriff is here and our county attorney's here, and they have things on their plate that they shouldn't have on their plate. This is supposed to be a federal issue, but I will say this. I do not remember Kim Reynolds or Pat Grassley asking Joe Biden what they could do to help with immigration.
All right, thank you all. I appreciate your input on that question. I mentioned earlier that we had invited representatives from certain groups to be with us this morning to pose a question. And I'd like to read a list of those groups. And if you are here representing a group and I don't mention your name, would you please let us know that? Open Heartland, Johnson County Attorney, Iowa City Community Outreach on Immigrants and Refugees, Immigrant Welcome Network, Johnson County, Coralville Food Pantry, and Iowa City Catholic Worker House. Are there any other group representatives here today? All right, great. So if you've been invited to represent a group, please make a line at the microphone and remember to keep your question to 1 minute. And then following the invited organizations, we'll open it up for questions from other audience members. So representatives of groups, please come on up and ask your question. And you can form a line, so we'll keep things moving smoothly. Yes, go ahead.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Yadira Castillo, soy miembro de Escucha Mi Voz, soy madre, esposa, trabajadora doméstica e inmigrante de Honduras. Soy líder del Comité de Trabajadoras Domésticas de Escucha Mi Voz. He venido aquí porque quiero que sepan que mis derechos laborales y humanos son constantemente vulnerados. Yo huí de Honduras por la violencia. Y por las pocas probabilidades que había. Vine a este país buscando una vida segura y en paz para mí y para mi familia. Sin embargo, las condiciones de trabajo de los trabajadores domésticos e inmigrantes son muy difíciles. Por ejemplo, no importa qué tan enfermo estés y debemos de ir a trabajar y no nos pagan. Si te cancelan el servicio a último minuto, tampoco nos pagan. Trabajamos días enteros de pie, siempre en movimiento y sin tiempo de descanso para tomar el lunch. No tenemos ningún tipo de seguro médico y laboral. No tenemos la certeza de que mañana hay trabajo. Lo único que tenemos es incertidumbre. ¿Están ustedes dispuestos a trabajar con nosotros para pasar una ley que proteja los derechos de los trabajadores inmigrantes? De los trabajadores domésticos, perdón. También quisiera saber si ustedes están haciendo algo para proteger a la comunidad inmigrante. Muchas gracias.
Good morning. My name is Yadira Castillo. I'm a member of Escucha Mi Voz in the Catholic Worker House. I'm a mother, a wife, a domestic worker, and an immigrant from Honduras. I'm a leader of Escucha Mi Voz Domestic Worker Committee. I'm here today to tell you that my rights as a domestic worker and as a human are being constantly violated. I fled Honduras because of the violence and the lack of opportunities. I came to this country because I wanted a safe life for me and my family. However, the work and conditions for immigrant domestic workers are very poor. For example, it doesn't matter if you're sick, you still have to show up, otherwise you won't get paid. If the owner of the house you're supposed to clean cancels last minute, you won't get paid either. We work long days, always on our feet and moving around. It's a very physical job. We don't have any type of health insurance or any insurance for that matter. We only have uncertainty. Are you willing to work with us to introduce a domestic worker bill of rights? And I also would like to know what specifically are you doing to protect the immigrant community? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Appreciate it. So we'll let legislators have a minute to think and then answer the question if you have an answer.
Ma'am, what was your name one more time?
Arida.
Thank you for being here and for sharing your story and for the question. Look, every worker deserves dignity. It doesn't matter what kind of profession you have. It doesn't matter, what kind of work you're engaged in. I think every single person up here has been a strong supporter of making sure that we have safe conditions for every Iowan. And I don't think that there'd be any exceptions up here for people who are engaged in domestic work. I think we'd want to look at what language you'd be proposing in terms of specific protections, but all of our email addresses are public. Happy to chat with you more afterwards to learn more about what specifically you're envisioning. And I think that's a really important issue that all of us up here could certainly want to learn more about and see what we could do.
Yeah, and I can't say that it's specific to immigrants, but I have worked on a Workers' Bill of Rights legislation a few years back, and we continue to try to advance that in the Iowa House for the state, and we unfortunately just keep getting a lot of pushback. But workers' rights is definitely something that we, all of us up here, care about and are trying to defend.
Yeah, please get us a copy or some language that you're referring to for that domestic Bill of Rights.
I don't know that I have much more to add. We need language. Every worker deserves dignity, as Senator Walz said. We cannot, to be honest, we cannot guarantee that we can get anything through, but we can certainly in the next session, because it's too late to introduce that sort of bill this session, we can certainly discuss the issue. We talk about economic rights and economic security all the time, and we can certainly introduce legislation next session.
Gracias por tu pregunta. I think that on the healthcare specific aspect, the fact that we have a system in which an entire class of people don't have access to healthcare because of the work they do is a great example of why we need changes to our healthcare system.
Thank you. Thanks for the question and thanks for your responses. You may go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Hai Huyen. I am representing the Corville Community Food Pantry. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold too, so my voice cracked. My question today is, well, I want to give a little bit about myself. I am an immigrant. I immigrated to the U.S. 35 years ago, and one thing I can tell you that immigrants abide by the law more than natural born citizen. I can swear by that. And because we know that the opportunity that we have here, it's not easy to come by. And so we do everything that we can in order to be a model citizen, to secure the opportunity not only for ourselves, but also for our children as well. So with the cut of the USDA, it's affect not only the food, but it's also bring forward, an issue that we don't address here in our state. There are a lot of children who go to school who are, who were born by immigrant parents. And those immigrant parents, some of them are legal citizens. Some of them, for whatever reason, chose not to go through the path of naturalization because they still wanted to be a citizen in the country that they are from. And a lot of countries do not give you the dual citizenship. So if you choose one, you have to forego the other one. And they understand the sacrifice that they make. They won't be able to vote. They won't be able to be eligible for a lot of the benefits here. So my question today is, what can you all do at the state level, and how do you convince your colleague to have a measure that would protect immigrant kids who are in school, to make sure that they still receive the same benefit at any kid that go to school, and that is free and reduced school lunch? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hi. Trust me, your opening line will be used a couple times on the House floor the rest of this session. As I mentioned in the opening, my daughters have a couple very good friends who are in similar situations where they're worried about their future. Here's one thing, an observation of interest. A person I've worked with over the years, a Republican in Northwest Iowa, when we're talking about children in school, it's always the children he knows. He fights to protect them, but not protect all the children across the state. It's like when they talk about public schools and in their demise, his public school is a good one. It's the other public schools that are terrible. The children that work, their parents work in his region, which is, as I said, Sac City and Storm Lake. Those situations he supports. He supports it when it's in his district, but not outside his district. Long-winded answer to Hi's question is that how do we, and I don't know the answer, how do we convince them be concerned for people, our neighbors, not just their neighbors?
It's a really good question, Hi, and I'm glad you posed it. I challenge anyone in this audience who's not an immigrant or child or grandchild of immigrants to raise their hand, because I doubt there are any here. This is a nation of immigrants. And it also purports to be a state and a nation that cares about its children. There is nothing pro-life about not feeding kids in school. It's the reason that I pushed bills the last couple of years that, of course, haven't gone anywhere for free school breakfast and lunch. Because we all know, and the data shows, that when kids eat, when they are not hungry, they learn better and they succeed better, and it helps their families as well, because they don't have to worry about, are they going to be able to feed their kids 3 meals a day? Maybe they only have to focus on 1, but it helps our society broadly overall. And it's hard. I can't imagine walking up to anyone and saying, do you think we should feed the kids? Do you think kids should eat? And having them say no. What's happened with respect to the Department of Agriculture cutting these programs is not acceptable. States like Pennsylvania are suing. They are trying to get the funds back. We have a smaller program here in Iowa by our agriculture department that I believe is going to go forward. But we actually also have an opportunity on Monday. I will be at the Ag Dinner. The U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, is the keynote speaker at that dinner this year, and I hope that she will get some very pointed questions.
Counselor, really appreciate you being here today. Someone else who's fighting through a cold to be here and ask a really important question. Look, no Iowa kid should be hungry, period. End of sentence. There are 100,000 kids today who experience food insecurity in our state. It's 100,000 too many. And the fact that the USDA is pulling, I think, $11.3 million that was supposed to go to Iowa producers for fresh vegetables, dairy, meat, that was supposed to go to kids in schools and daycares. That's just wrong. When Joni Ernst said that she was going to make them squeal, I didn't think she was talking about our children. I mean, that's wrong. And that's absolutely something that she should be standing up against. We're not seeing nearly enough Republicans from Iowa in Washington, D.C. speak out against it. I believe Representative Sheets has introduced legislation that has actually gotten Democratic legislator from Cedar Rapids has introduced legislation that has gotten Republican co-sponsors. Part of the problem is that leadership, especially in the Senate, has not been willing to let that legislation move forward. The reality is that you're seeing, I think, across the Midwest, a lot of Democratic state governments stand up and say that we're not going to let any of our kids be hungry at school. Iowa certainly should be following suit.
I get really frustrated watching hungry kids be turned into a political football. We had a bill we had a bill pass the Iowa House with, I believe, on a party line vote, if I recall correctly. Just genuinely can't remember whether it was this week or last because it's been a bit of a blur, but that was pushed by a group that the whole goal is to make sure that to go in violation of USDA food nutrition standards for school lunches to push more animal protein and higher sodium. These are the actual bills that are making it to the floor in the House and that are passing in the Iowa House right now. And it was a weird experience for me because I got up and talked about the fact that this would have taken school lunch away from me because I became a vegetarian when I was 12. And I don't tell anybody else that they should be a vegetarian, but I do think it's nice that I had an opportunity to eat at school. I think I can speak for all of us when I say it is baffling because, as Senator Weiner said, nobody, if you ask them to their face, should kids get to eat, is going to say no. But then we see these bills and the funding changes. And I mean, you want to know what my priorities are, look at the budget.
I think just to cap off what Senator Walz and Representative Levin have brought up, the bill to make more meat available in school lunches came through state government, and Representative Sheets did offer an amendment to have universal free school lunch. And the response that we got from that bill manager was, well, that's really parental responsibility, and why should the state do that? That's up to the parents. So that's what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Hi, Rachel.
Good morning. Rachel Zimmerman-Smith, Johnson County Attorney. I've certainly bothered you all this legislative session with things. There have been a ton of bad bills for county attorneys, for law enforcement, and for victims of violent crime. But my real question is, what can we here in Johnson County, either as citizens or county officials, do to help all of you in Des Moines get the information that you need to try to convince people to do things that aren't hurting the most vulnerable among us?
Thank you.
That's a really great question. Personally, I've had some small successes where someone will share with me, like I've had a Republican tell me why they're concerned or opposed to a bill, and then I'm able to take their concern, which maybe is a little bit different of a angle than my own, and bring that to another member of their caucus and maybe see if that lands a little bit better. And so hearing from folks, even if you think like I agree with you, if I represent you, it's really helpful for me to hear your perspective. I mean, I know there's a lot of folks in this room who do email me and from District 89, and I appreciate that. But if you think I already know, don't assume that I do, because sometimes there's something that is shared that I can latch onto, and I can, a personal experience or a perspective that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
I mean, you may also hear arguments. You may hear arguments in your community. You may hear about, like in your case, Rachel, you may hear about a legal case somewhere that is not this area that can really make an impact with some of our colleagues because it will hit home. And that you've heard that before from us, but it's true that it is true that it appears to be necessary in many cases for a lot of our Republican colleagues that something has to impact them personally, or they need to have a constituent who comes to them directly. So you may know people in other counties, may know people who have an issue they can bring to someone in a different county. We helped push the compensate the Boy Scouts bill over the line last year by finding someone in Senator Kreinbrink's county who went to him directly, convinced him. So we had, in the end, the whole Senate on board and were able to push some of the folks in the House. So in some ways, it's a word of mouth and a different kind of sort of neighbor to neighbor issue, in addition to all the things that I know you're all already doing.
Okay.
I think maybe the only other thing, Rachel, thank you for being here. I think I'd maybe add, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that we're always kind of constantly trying to angle on bills. And so just a little bit of grace as we try to navigate that and make things happen is always appreciated. But appreciate everything that you do. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Deb Duncase, and I'm here with Susie Corbin-Muir to represent Open Heartland. We really appreciate the work you're doing. I can't imagine how difficult it's been in the current political climate. If you don't know Open Heartland is a local nonprofit that works to not just support, but to empower our immigrant community. When we started Open Heartland 5 years ago, I had no idea how many of our neighbors and our friends are living a pretty much invisible life because of their immigration status. When I was invited here to ask a question, it's actually really difficult to come up with a question in the current administrative environment that's hopeful, that maybe you could answer. However, my question is, because the families we work with in this community, they're not just immigrant families who have moved here. These are our neighbors. These are people who work hard, who love their children, who want to build a decent life. These are our friends. What can we do? So not just you, but all of us. I agree with Rachel. What can we do here in this community to try to make their lives safe? That's the biggest thing, to keep and protect our families that are immigrants in this community, to keep them safe in the current political environment, and to help them feel that they belong.
Thank you, Deb.
I mean, Deb, I'd be interested in giving you a little bit of my time to share more about what exactly Open Heartland is doing to support these folks. No, I mean, if you can get back up in front of the mic and just share more about what you guys do, if that's okay in terms of counting towards my time.
Yeah. Okay, so Open Heartland started just to get to know who the immigrant community is. We started with box parties at some of the mobile home communities, trying to make friendships, build relationships. We've done that. We currently interact with more than 400 local immigrant families living in Johnson County. What we do is we provide some educational enrichment activities. We do English classes as you'd expect. We help people study for their citizenship exams. We do tutoring for kids. We do enrichment camps. We do sewing clubs. We do arts activities. We're having a flower arrangement team building activity soon. We have a leadership team made up of 18 Latino women who make all the decisions as to what our programs and activities are. We have a food subsidy program that helps families acquire food weekly. We have a small tienda where families can gather some of the basic necessities that they need for life, because most families who are immigrants and come to this country now are coming with the backpacks on their back or less. But all of that aside, we try to build relationships. We try to help families feel like they're not alone in Johnson County, that there's a network of people who care. And so we are totally volunteer driven, no paid staff. We have a lot of volunteers who are native English speakers, an equal number who are native Spanish speakers. But come and visit us, Zach. We'd love that.
Thanks, Deb.
You also do the adopt a family over the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great, we always like doing the shopping for that. We need a new governor. I'm sorry. If we want to, that's what we really need in 2026. We need a new governor in Iowa so that we can restore the feelings of safety among families and reduce the fear. So anything you and we can do to get a decent governor is hugely appreciated.
And we need to, all of us, not just the legislators, we all need to support organizations such as yours and the other ones that are represented here today, because particularly in time, in these unprecedented is an overused term these days because it keeps happening. But in these times, what is going to sustain virtually everybody is community and community building and finding people you can trust. And that will be key. So we need to support financially and in terms of helping build these networks.
And the one other thing I would add is I know that all of us, we do these public events and we post about them and et cetera, but all of us are also all the time doing quiet events, closed events. When there are folks who want to meet with someone and not have it be visible, we are all accessible for those kinds of events. And sometimes we have had those opportunities to meet with folks who live those invisible lives. And that's an incredibly valuable opportunity for us.
Can I have 2 more minutes, please?
You
can have mine.
Okay, great.
You
Awesome.
may.
Well, first of all, Deb, just thanks for sharing some of that. I think you touched on a couple issues that I think affect a lot of Iowans. Housing affordability and protections for renters, especially folks who live in manufactured homes and trailer parks, is an issue that I've been passionate about my entire time in the legislature, and something that I'm continuing to work on. Unfortunately, I'm playing a lot of defense right now. There have been some bills that have actually made it worse to basically rent these lots or live in these homes. And so thankfully we've been able to stop some of those from advancing this year, which is a good thing. I think that there's probably some dovetail with the question we got earlier about Workers' Bill of Rights, and trying to make sure that we're getting some of those protections in place for folks who are working. And then I was glad you mentioned the English as a learning language classes. I've worked over the years to try and increase funding. A lot of our community colleges offer those classes for free to the public to help folks learn English, and also do that at no cost, so that they're able to help hopefully find more employment opportunities and address the workforce shortage that we have in this state. So I think that there's some good stuff that is happening, but there's obviously a lot of defense that we need to play as well. And so appreciate you sharing some more of that. Thanks.
Okay. There are a couple of invited groups we haven't heard from yet, so come on up.
Hello, everybody. I'm Daphne Leeson, and I'm representing the Immigrant Welcome Network of Johnson County. I know some of the folks here today, and we do work with them. And frankly, I'm a little embarrassed because I'm not quite sure what I want to ask, but perhaps only to say something about what we do with immigrants. And if there's anything that you can do to help us, please tell me. So I am the program coordinator, which means I get to do everything from cleaning toilets to getting immigrants housed and fed, and their kids into school, and the parents into jobs that will pay them a living wage. And we help them navigate a very complicated, difficult to understand system. These people don't know about copy and paste from your laptop. They don't have a laptop. They might have a phone that's only WhatsApp. So they're not getting messages from prospective employers. So we are monitoring their emails the whole time. We are reminding them your kid needs to get to see a doctor, a dentist. We're finding those doctors and dentists. We're getting them health coverage. And yes, I take people the whole time to Open Heartland, the whole time. How can you help us? Yeah, you know, I carry these in my bag. I do not wish to speak with you or answer your questions. You know, these red cards. We're still handing them out. Our folks are still petrified. I'm petrified. We're struggling. We are all struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne.
The only thing that I would say is that both locally and nationally, we have to figure out a way to change the conversation on immigration and shift it back to where it needs to be.
Daphne, this is not exactly the heart of your question, but you made a comment about the system that folks are having to navigate. And I think that's one of my big frustrations right now that you're seeing with DOGE at the federal level, as well as with Iowa DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency. I think all of us want a government that's more efficient, that works better. I think my concern with what you're seeing at the federal level is that rather than disrupting the system and making it work better, it seems like there's more focus on destroying the system and just burning it to the ground. To the point that you just made, I think that a lot of folks are going to struggle even more to navigate the system after Elon Musk and his people are done with it. And I think at the state level, you've seen Governor Reynolds and the Iowa Doge claim that they were, doing Doge before Doge was a thing. But as you just illustrated, I think there's a lot of people here who think that the system of government benefits for people who legally qualify for them has gotten more difficult to navigate, not less over time. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit with neighborhood centers of Johnson County, and they were talking about some of the families who they work with and how on the child care assistance application, there's this question on like page 17 which I mean, again, is part of the problem, right? Is how much paperwork is involved here. But on page 17, ask this question: does your household have less than $1 million in assets? And the obvious answer or the quote unquote correct answer to that question is yes, your household has less than $1 million in assets. But I'm sure it won't surprise you to learn that most people read that question and say, do you have $1 million in assets? And people say, no, of course I don't have $1 million in assets. So they hit the no box. And now that entire application, which is like 25 pages, is basically void. And so it gets sent in. To your point, this is all happening via paper mail, not via email. So the application goes in, gets processed, it gets rejected, it gets sent back. Don't necessarily explain why you didn't qualify, or you can't immediately figure out why you didn't qualify. And so to me, that is a perfect illustration of the kinds of things that a DOGE, quote unquote, Department of Government Efficiency, should be focused on solving and making that system easier to navigate, more, practical to navigate. And instead, you're seeing them basically go after Social Security benefits, which is the exact wrong thing to be doing.
One thing we've actually gotten done in the state, and it's really a shame that Representative Zabner couldn't be here today. He did have a previously long-term scheduled event to go to, but we found that when you're filling out your Social Security or for Medicaid, no, it was for Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Yeah, Medicaid. There's
the intake paperwork.
Yeah, the intake paperwork. And this is what I thought you were going, Representative Walls, when you said page 17, but it's like page 17 where it asks, do you want to register to vote? And a lot of people don't get to that. It's a paper form that has written out, if you want to vote, go to http / all of the www.here./ every, that's not exactly making it easy. And Representative Zabner, really went in on Kelly Garcia, the department head for Health and Human Services, and said, "This is not. You're not following the law with this. This is not how these are supposed to be presented, and this is not the way. It's just not the way this is supposed to work." And he did get that fixed. And I really wish he was here because he knows the number, and I don't remember the number, but thousands of people voted after that change, or thousands of people registered to vote after that change was made. And there was a direct, a connect that it was that helped them get registered. So there are some things we can do. I'm gonna make sure that I let him know he was really needed today, and he abandoned us here.
If there's if we're staying on this point about the actual examples of government inefficiency and things not working, this last week the Senate passed and the House passed a version of it as well. These work reporting requirements for people who are on Medicaid expansion. So just to rewind the clock a little bit, about a decade ago, the state of Iowa joined many other states in expanding Medicaid qualification to Iowans whose household income is up to about 133% of the federal poverty line, which for a lot of working class, working poor families in our state meant that for the first time, because their employers often did not offer them health insurance benefits, they were able to get access to affordable health care. The bill that was put forward, it has basically work, and it's not work requirements, it's work reporting requirements. It's important to be clear about that, because what basically the bill is going to do, if it's implemented, is going to require people who are on Iowa Medicaid expansion, which is called the Health and Wellness Plan, to jump through these reporting requirements to report that they are working. Of course, the vast majority of Iowans who are enrolled in Medicaid expansion, if they aren't retired, already are working. And the thing that was particularly egregious about this legislation is that this is not just a work reporting requirements bill. I think that you could have some conversation and find, some language around work requirements that if it had the proper exemptions, you could probably get some bipartisan support. This bill says that if the federal government ever changes national requirements around work requirements, that the state of Iowa will end Medicaid expansion and 180,000 Iowans will lose their health insurance. You're taking power out of the hands of Iowans and putting it in the hands of Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, at the whim of the president. It's completely nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense. And for that reason, I believe every Democrat in the legislature voted against it. And to add to that, there was legislation that was brought forward by someone I think we all consider a friend, State Representative Josh Turek, called Work Without Worry. So literally trying to help people who are on Medicaid be able to work without worrying that they'll lose their benefits if they accidentally, work a little bit too much in a given month or year. And Republicans, despite having that bill having had some bipartisan support in the past, did not include that in the legislation, and instead are basically trying to play political games while jeopardizing the health insurance that 180,000 Iowans depend on. It's absolutely it's so bad it's hard to believe it's actually happening.
Daphne, I had the opportunity in early February to learn a lot about the first 60 days after an individual or a family arrives, and just how much it takes and how much they need to be ready after 60 days. The idea of some of our immigration systems, the way that things are set up, is that after 60 days, they should be pretty self-sufficient. I wasn't self-sufficient in the first 60 days of my life, but to be fair, I was also 60 days old. But I just listening to the litany of kind of similar to some of the things that you're talking about that you're helping people to figure out. I mean, it's not just about, I have trouble finding a dentist appointment, for crying out loud. We all do. They have to find a dentist and a dentist appointment. And also maybe they don't speak the language of the dentist website. And also maybe they don't have a Verizon cell phone with a cell phone account, so they can actually peer back from that dentist if they get an appointment. I wish I had an answer to what we can do to do, a hard and fast answer to what we can do for you. But I think the answer is uplifting some of those stories and kind of making more visible the work that is being done to help people be successful when they come here. I mean, that's something that I think all of us would be very eager to do. So
it'd be super helpful if the federal government would uphold its contract.
Right. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Which they've broken with respect to refugees. I mean, refugees are probably the most highly vetted immigrants that come into the United States. of any. And the fact that they've simply cut off funding for refugee organizations and the federal government has failed to follow through on its duty and its contracts to the refugee organizations, causing them to then have to lay off staff and scramble to try and support these people in their first 60 and 90 days is not okay.
I just remembered kind of, you're gonna laugh because it's kind of the relevant one, but the committee I forgot to list is that I serve on the International Relations Committee, which is a joint committee between the House and the Senate, which Senator Weiner and I both sit on. And for years, I've been asking for us to have an immigrant and refugee panel. And that's something that's an idea that has been shot down every single time I've brought it forward, and shot down very nicely. Like, oh, I don't think we have time for that. I don't think that's, and then all of a sudden this year we had a presentation from Lutheran Services of Iowa after, I don't know if you guys heard, there was like a tweet that went out, people kind of noticed. And all of a sudden there was enough time for us to have a presentation from Lutheran Services of Iowa. And I personally would love to see more opportunities like that for us to learn in the Iowa legislature what is really being done to serve immigrants and to set them up for success.
Thank you for your work. I'm proud to be from a welcoming community and county. And actually, everyone here, we have a target on our back when we're in Des Moines because we're from Johnson County. Now, a little bit as a poke in the eye, I did draft a bill that made it legal for Johnson County to secede from the state of Iowa. What started off as a little tongue-in-cheek and poke in the eye, now I'm offering it in committee next week. Because what they want to do is cut this off, target us because we're a welcoming community, targeting us because we have economic growth, targeting us because people want to move here, targeting us because they love to come here 7 Saturdays out of the year during football season. They certainly enjoy it, but then they go back and say, ooh, I hate that community. I go, that's funny. You look like you were having fun at the tailgate. But we have much less than what you experience with the families you work with, a much smaller target. But we do have one, and we are fighting for you every day. I know it doesn't help as much as we'd like to see, but every day we are fighting for you, defending you, and making sure that voices are being heard.
Thank you. We have one more invited organization that we haven't heard from yet. Is there anyone here from the Iowa City Community Outreach on Immigrants and Refugees? No? Okay. We'd like to open the floor then for questions from the audience. And please remember when you come forward to give us your name and try to limit your question to 1 minute.
That's a first.
I think our organizations ask such great questions that we've covered lots of material here.
And we can ask questions not related to immigration?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name's Liz O'Hara, and I'm here to ask a question about House Bill 924, which was just passed by the House and reduced the age eligibility for purchase of handguns from 21 to 18. I've been a gun safety advocate for a long time, and my colleagues and I were, of course, distressed to see this bad bill passed. And we were surprised to see that Representative Jacoby and Nielsen voted for it. I asked Representative Jacoby for his reasons, and I appreciate your prompt response. I just wondered, I didn't quite understand what you were saying. You seemed to suggest that we needed to take a new direction with gun safety advocacy because of, the overwhelming vote on strict scrutiny, the constitutional amendment last year. Maybe I'd appreciate an explanation, and also your reasoning to Representative Nielsen.
Sure. Thank you for the email. It was a very difficult vote to take. I will say this in support of your view. My family has been very clear that I voted wrong. I've been married over 3 decades or 4 decades, and I'm used to saying maybe I was wrong, but mine is a deeper or a bigger umbrella. I have struggled over the years with us actually reaching an age of maturity. In other words, an age of maturity for everything across the board. We dabble in, and 16-year-olds can be tried as adults for certain crimes. We have 18-year-olds that can, well, soon maybe have a handgun, but they already could have an AR-14. We have an age for drinking. We have an age for contracts. We have an age for military service. I think at some point in time in the United States or in the States, we need to arrive at a true age of maturity. Now, for me, that age would, well, my wife said for men it would be 25, and for women it would be 16. So I'm sure she's pretty close in accuracy there. But to me, it was an age of maturity question. And, I'm not backing off the vote that I voted yes for, but I don't know if I would honestly vote the same next week after talking to both Lynette and the daughters. But I do think nationally, it's a time for us to come to an age of maturity. And the last part of the question is, I think by the vote that we saw for the constitutional amendment, for the Second Amendment, that everything that we believe in and 99% of the stuff we agree on did not move Iowa voters as far as I'd like to see. And there's something we have to do to connect with people more, because I know most people in their gut feel there has to be some common sense gun legislation.
Yeah, and I'll just say that part of my reasons are the same. It's an age of maturity. You're 18. You're supposed to be an adult. You can already get so many access to different firearms, and it's probably the only time I've ever voted for a firearms expansion. Might also be the last time I ever vote for it, but this one I felt I needed to support. I got several emails from people in my district I got a lot of just like the one-click, please do this. But I did get a few personal emails from people, and I didn't really get a lot from the other side. So it was one of those things where I listened to the people in my district. On a general level, I believe that there needs to be one age of maturity, and so that was my reason for voting yes.
Thank you. Karen?
Karen Franklin, no particular organization. First of all, I want to thank you for your advice about giving personal stories, because I often feel like, why contact our representatives? I know we agree. So I appreciate that. The question I have relates to the sheriff in Winnebago County. Is there any way that you know of that we can support this sheriff? I understand that it's a legal case, but I'm just looking for some education in any way that we can support the sheriff there. Countersuit?
I think our sheriff is here, and he and county attorney may know more about this suit. My sense is that we need to support the rule of law, and we need to support this working through the courts, because I think the attorney general is going to lose the suit. I think that the Winnebago sheriff, at least from what I have seen, I have not read the suit, stands on firm legal ground in his statement. He has not done anything illegal to my knowledge, and I don't believe that the attorney general at this point has anything to prove that. So, I have no idea how this is going to play out. But at least my initial reading of the laws is that his requirement that that a bill of retainer have been approved by a court or otherwise be appropriate is the law.
Yeah, let's be really clear about what happened here. The sheriff said that if he received a request that had not been properly vetted and approved by the courts, he wouldn't follow it.
That's his job.
That's what he said.
Yep.
Right? He also has complied with every single ICE request that has been made of his office since November 2018. And our Attorney General is playing politics, going after him, even though the lawsuit she filed acknowledges that he has complied with every request that has been approved and vetted by the courts over the last 7 years. Attorney General Byrd ran for Attorney General so she could give Biden the bird, I guess was what all the ad said. Well, Biden's gone, so maybe she will be too in 2026.
In the meantime, I would remind you, she is also a duly elected official, and perhaps some well-worded emails suggesting things that her office could be spending its time on that might be more productive are in order. See, yeah.
I mean, well, one more just big picture thing on this. Due process is really important. Like due process it's like everything. I mean, it is why. I mean, there's a reason it's in the Bill of Rights. There's a reason that we got some more on it with the 14th Amendment. There's a reason why you need due process to figure out who people are, what rights they're legally and constitutionally entitled to, and to make sure that you got the right person. I mean, that's what due process is. And so this idea that a law enforcement officer would be expected to carry out an order without due process. I mean, the last person to insist on that happening in this country was King George III. That's why we fought a revolution.
We're seeing an awful lot of lack of due process in alleged immigration cases right now. And to Senator Wall's point, the language of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states that no person, it doesn't talk about what status that person has, but it states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Good morning. My name is Pete Damiano from University Heights, and I want to thank you again for your publicly willingness to show up. I've got a good government transparency question that I think also plays to the interests of the League of Women Voters. As you know, there's a lot of legislation that comes from quote unquote bill mills or other outside groups that get handed to legislators. Sometimes they read them, sometimes they don't. Go through the LSA, going through. Curious, how often are you approached with those types of legislation, and what are the things that you've been seeing this session that are being influenced by things that are really unrelated to what's happening in Iowa?
Can we have a whole new forum? Because this year, I was first elected 2003. This year, by far, has been the largest number of bills I've seen that are not generated from the minds of Iowans or Iowa legislators. These are all nationalist bills. These are all, many of them, part of 2025 project. There's an increased experience of people running the bills who, two things, did not actually read the bill because they didn't write it, and second of all, don't understand the intended or unintended consequences. So this year I have to say, and I think someone else may know, I think there's been more bills filed this year than the last couple decades. I know all of us file bills. We're usually pretty targeted to things that interest us, like Johnson County seceding from the state. But I think you see the other team have quite a few, and they are nationalist bills.
They're not really working together either, because we will have like 5 bills that are incredibly similar. Maybe 1 or 2 lines or even 1 or 2 words are different. And we'll have to have subcommittees on all 5 of those bills when they should just be 1, but they're in so much disarray that they can't get their, well, I would say stuff together, as Representative Jacoby would say, in order to get, actual governing done.
Well, I think we had another forum yesterday, which Senator Walz raised a very valid point, which is, and I've sort of been watching the few years I've been in the legislature, the degradation of transparency and democratic norms. One of those is the whole purpose of subcommittees. The purpose of, first of all, a bill should not get to a subcommittee unless the party in charge believes it is ripe to move on. Secondly, the purpose of a subcommittee is, yes, it is to get the views of the public and experts on the issue, and it is also for the 3 representatives or senators, or if it's a bigger bill, 5, who sit on it to determine if that bill deserves to move forward, if it is ripe, if it is ready to actually move forward through the process. And what I've seen in my relatively few years in the legislature is a tendency, and I expect it's come from the top, of our Republican colleagues to simply say, well, let's move this along. For legislation that has no business going anywhere, that probably should never have seen a subcommittee to begin with, and definitely should not be moving on to the committee phase. So that in itself is an issue, and it strikes, and we see it, among other things, with bills that have come from outside institutions. The one bill that we surprisingly managed to kill in subcommittee shortly before the first funnel was a bill from the Cicero Institute that was a really bad, horrible, no good bill having to do with homelessness. And I about literally fell off my chair when one of the Republican senators said, I am not signing off on this. So it didn't move forward, ended up not moving forward in the House. But that is the exception rather than the rule. A lot of these bills should not be moving forward. A lot of these bills do not deserve to see the light of day in a subcommittee or otherwise. And so that's one of the many challenges that we're dealing with, is this sort of flood of bad bills. And then a lot of you have to pay attention to, wait a minute, how do we get rid of this bad bill that's going to hurt libraries, or how do we get rid of this bad bill that's going to do something else, when they never should have been given a subcommittee to begin with?
Pete, I really appreciate the question. Let's be really clear. Special interests and moneyed interests run Des Moines. That's what's happening. Just last week, there was this Senate File 603 that Senator Weiner just alluded to. It was brought to the legislature by the Iowa Workforce Development Department. Totally non-controversial bill. Made some good technical, non-controversial changes. It sailed out of the Senate, I think 47-0. Got over to the House, and the Republicans in the House dropped what's called a strike after amendment. It's called a strike after amendment because it strikes everything in the bill after the enacting clause, which is the first clause, and then replaces it. And what this bill did with this strike after amendment was it basically said that cities that are putting projects out to bid can't require that people who are bidding on those projects have apprenticeship programs, which is specifically targeted at labor unions, but also is targeted at a lot of other builders who have these kinds of registered apprentice programs. That bill then gets pushed through the House on a party line vote, if I'm remembering correctly, comes back to the Senate where it passes again on a party line vote. That amendment was written by a special interest group lobbyist. That was the plan the whole time. Even the folks at Workforce Development didn't realize this was happening until they found out their bill was being hijacked and run roughshod over by Republican leaders who are in the pocket of these special interest groups and who circumvented the public comment process because they knew it would be unpopular, because there is broad support for apprenticeship programs to get more of our young folks to have opportunities in the trades. And so it's just a perfect illustration of the culture of corruption that has taken root in Des Moines under Republican leadership, and the refusal and inability of Republican leaders to stand up to the moneyed interests who are calling the shots under the Golden Dome.
Just as one specific example that was, I was on a subcommittee earlier this year in education, and what we learned in that subcommittee that I knew coming in, but apparently my colleagues did not, was that this bill would have made it illegal for a young woman who performs with the Des Moines Symphony Orchestra to keep performing, and it would have created a whole bunch of dangerous level of liability for the symphony orchestra if they allowed this young woman to keep performing with the Des Moines Symphony Orchestra. And you know why? Because she's a trans woman. And she lives her adult life as a woman, and she is a woman, and she plays, and she is a professional musician, and she is wonderful. And the bill, as written, would have enacted huge liability for the symphony if a child came and heard her play and saw her play. Yeah. So then that bill was fundamentally amended at the committee level, and I was really, really relieved. Still not it's not a perfect bill, but it would no longer have put that woman's career in danger. And then I had the most fascinating conversation with the bill manager of that bill, in which I learned that the amended version apparently no longer does what was intended, and so we may not see that amended version, which I'm kind of glad that we may not see the amended version come up for debate in the House. But what that tells me is that stopping that woman from playing with the Des Moines Symphony Orchestra was the goal.
But why are the Republican lawmakers not coming to these forums? I don't know. It's a mystery.
I will say Representative Horo was not the bill manager, but was on that subcommittee with me.
Well, Pete, thanks for the question, because you mentioned the word transparency, I think, once or twice. I've loved this for years, but at the state capitol, the majority party, and the minority party does it too, but the majority party has the votes, will go into a private room and decide what the laws are going to look like. And one of the laws that they decided what they're going to look like, what open meetings are for cities and counties and school boards. So they say, oh, you have to follow this, and 3 out of 5 of you can't be at dinner together, or it's hilarious. But they go in a group, and it's all in closed doors, determining how they can reduce or transmit transparency to local government, and there is none, very little at the state level.
The budget. Another thing decided that used to have House and Senate joint subcommittees, the entire amounts of the budget and what's going to be in budget bills is now decided behind closed doors.
Hi, Tony.
I wish to thank you for your efforts to support and bring about the bills that are helpful to our Iowa country and to the world. But I have a question. My name is Tony Wobeter, and I have a question. What happened to human rights? That's the basis of which, as I stop to think about the fact that my ancestors were immigrants. They came to this country and they found a new life. And the opportunity is here, but what are our fears? What are the fears that are leading our leaders of our country to sabotage the efforts of people to have a life in our country? It's just sad.
It is very sad. There is one political party that doesn't treat all humans as human. They just don't. And they don't believe that every single person should have the same level of rights.
And we just had a bill that established that separate is equal.
Yeah. Well, separate,
Literally.
separate but equal is not inherently. What's the exact
Bad.
phrase? Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget the exact phrase, but
Yeah.
yes, separate but equal is now been passed into the code.
Tony, when we've seen the greatest expansion of human rights in our country, it has tended to happen at times of material prosperity, right? You saw in the post-war era, in the 20th century, vast gains for racial minorities and for women, later on for LGBT folks. And I think that a part of what has happened is that over the last however many decades at this point, I think there is a real sense among a wide part of our population, both here in the state and I think more broadly across the country, that economic opportunity is getting harder and harder to find. And you have some people who have decided to demagogue around the lack of economic opportunity and to point the finger at immigrants, at transgender people, at Jewish people, at all kinds of other folks who are now being targeted and scapegoated. And I think that there is some real reckoning that needs to happen in across our political spectrum about where is that economic opportunity, where did it go? But I think Representative Jacoby is right that when it comes to human rights, there are very clear differences between the parties. And I think that our focus really does have to be on figuring out how do we restore economic opportunity so that the reach of this demagoguery and this blame is not received the same way that it has been since President Trump came down that golden escalator in Trump Tower back in 2015. Because there's no doubt that as an individual, he has had an enormous impact on this country and his ability to harness a lot of that, whether you want to call it anxiety or fear, or feeling of being left behind, and then to channel it into a way we've heard today from people who are very scared about what forces he has unleashed in this country. And I do think fundamentally that a lot of Iowans, I mean, you look at this is a state that supported Democratic candidates for president like 5 out of 6 times until 2016. And you look around and I think a lot of folks are wondering like what happened or what changed. And even though we've had tremendous growth here in Johnson County, the reality is that in probably 70 out of 100 counties, economic opportunity is going away. There are fewer opportunities for people today than their parents had or their grandparents had. And even though their cell phone might be better or faster or whatever, the material opportunities in those communities really have been shrinking. And they're looking for somebody to blame and they're looking for a way out. And Donald Trump is offering it to them in a way that I think obviously a lot of us find very shocking and abhorrent, but it's something. And so I think for us, as a Democratic Party, both here in Iowa and I think nationally, we need a really clear vision about how we're going to bring broad-based economic opportunity back. And that's not going to happen overnight, but it is something that needs to be a big priority because I think that's going to be the ticket to reversing the erosion that we've seen on human rights, both here in Iowa and across the United States. Sorry, that was not a 2-minute answer.
I would just point briefly to the media landscape. I think the media landscape is very skewed and very broken ever since the fairness doctrine went away. When you look at the influencers and the Joe Rogans and the podcasts and who controls the news, we no longer. It's been some time since there was sort of an even platform of news across this country. Small newspapers virtually exist in almost name only, including a newspaper here in Johnson County. So one of the other big challenges in front of us is figuring out how to re-level that playing field.
Thank you. We have one more question. Have time for one more question, and there's someone who is ready to ask it for us.
Hi, I'm Catherine. So our state's motto is, as you probably all know, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. How is it possible that a bill passed to strip civil rights from a particular group, and I believe in this case, well, use LGBTQ as the general name for the group, but it could be any group because it started with one group. So who's next? So how did that bill come about, and what's being done or what can be done to reverse the damage and the loss of rights? Thank you.
Thank you for your
It is a
question.
national bill. It's a nationalist bill, and the first step to undo it is elect a new governor.
Are you running?
November 2026. But until then, we will keep fighting for you. I mean, we don't let this issue go for a day. It's something that we felt strong enough to fight through in committees, on the floor. And it's near and dear to my and our heart too. It affects my family, it affects your family, affects everyone in Iowa. And I'm doing my best not to use any swear words because it really angers me. And I thank you for the question.
There are 584 days until Election Day, November 3rd, 2026.
We just have to get there.
Yeah. Look, the bill, I think the reason it happened, just mechanically, the way it did, there was actually a lawsuit that was filed here in Johnson County over a person who had been filed here. And Republicans, I think, saw that lawsuit when it was filed, and they realized that it had a chance of winning under the way that the law was currently written. And so they moved quickly to try and change the law so that the lawsuit wouldn't have a chance of moving forward. When a lot of people have forgotten this, but when that law was passed, it was actually passed with bipartisan support, back in the early 2000s. And I think it actually goes back to the point that Tony raised here a moment ago about the kind of broad erosion of human rights in our state. In terms of how we fight back, in addition to electing new leaders in the state, I would say that the other thing, there has been a lawsuit that's been filed trying to see whether or not this was actually a legal bill that they passed, trying to change the civil rights law the way that they did. And so I think that, one of the things that was shocking to me was Catherine. I asked the person who was sponsoring the legislation, who was running the bill on the Senate floor, because there was a provision in there that basically removed protections for transgender people against discrimination in their workplace. And I asked him kind of what he thought about that. And he said, and this is a direct quote, "I hadn't really thought about it." He hadn't really thought about the fact that transgender people are more likely to be discriminated against in the workplace, that they're more likely to be discriminated against in trying to get access to housing, trying to get access to credit. And, I hope that in Johnson County, we're good enough neighbors here that our transgender neighbors and friends won't face that kind of discrimination. But I worry that in a lot of parts of the state that won't be the case. That was precisely why we needed to have those protections there. There is some federal case law where I think we're kind of cautiously optimistic may provide some relief, but I think the problem is that accessing that at a federal level is a heck of a lot harder than it was here in the state when we had a very clear protection in state law, and that's really unfortunate.
Catherine, first of all, is that with a K or with a C? Okay. So one thing that I will offer that brought me a little comfort in a couple of really, 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 really bad days during that week is that Johnson County electeds from the cities, from the county, and from the state were all there in with the 2,500 Iowans who showed up to say this is wrong, to say do not take this away from us because we know this is wrong. We have, when you ask how do we fight back, that's how. More people showed up to protest stripping gender identity from the Civil Rights Code than we have ever seen in one day come through that building. That's how. And then we make sure every single one of those people gets 3 people to vote.
I mean, one of the things that I've heard in forums in other parts of the state is, well, focus on this and we're going to get hit with it in the elections as we have before. My answer is we stand up for everyone. We stand up for everyone's rights. And once you start stripping the rights, civil rights from one group, and it was clearly intentional stripping of basic rights like employment protections and housing protections and credit protections, you are literally on a slippery slope, as I believe Representative Holt indicated that he wanted to do, to strip others. So my answer is always, this is not a, stand up for only one group. We'll stand up for every single group because every single group deserves civil rights and protections in this country. And one of the things that we've seen, I think, across this state is, and that we can continue to encourage, is many business organizations and business leaders and different groups standing up for those rights. And that's something that we can encourage locally and elsewhere.
Okay.
Bonnie, if I could have one last.
Oh, you want more time? Zach, come on.
Just one last point on this. When Republicans talked about this on the floor, they said this is about protecting women and girls. They said that over and over and over and over. And I mean, like, it was literally a talking point. I mean, and I asked, Senator Schultz, have you thought about how this is going to affect the ability of transgender Iowans to find gainful employment? Well, Senator Walz, this is about protecting women and girls. Okay. And so I think that it is important that we see that's the talking point they're using. And so I think it's just, we need to be very clear-eyed that, what Republicans are trying to do is divide us and pit one group of people against another. And that to overcome that, we need to be really focused on bringing people together and not allowing them to divide us in that way, in pitting people against each other. So that's just that's what they're saying out there. And I think that's what you need to figure out how we're going to respond to.
I know I feel more safe. But for sure, I would much rather be in a room full of drag queens reading books to children than a room full of 50 Republican men.
Okay.
On that note,
This has been a great conversation today. Thank you all for some really thoughtful questions. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude to our legislators for fighting hard for us. It's not easy being in Des Moines these days, and it hasn't been for a while. So thank you so much. We're going to conclude the forum by giving each of our legislators an opportunity to make some closing remarks. We'll ask that you limit them to 3 minutes. And we're going to start again through the seniority process. And that means, Zach, you're up first.
Thanks. How much time do I have?
3.
Well, first of all, I want to start by saying thank you to Maureen Braddock, our timekeeper over here, for doing her best to keep us under control, and for the steady stream of cough drops that she was throwing to me during the forum, which include motivational sayings on these. I don't know if you caught that, but one that says to put your game face on. So appreciate those tremendously. I'm really grateful to the league for facilitating the conversation, and I'm grateful to my Democratic colleagues for showing up. And I think that all of you deserve to have senators and representatives who are willing to come here, willing to answer questions from the public. And it's very unfortunate that our Republican colleagues have declined to do so for all three. We haven't had a single Republican legislator at all 3 forums this year, which is it's shameful is what it is. One other thing I'll just mention, because there's going to be some news reports about it soon. I am exploring a run for the United States Senate against Joni Ernst in 2026. I am not expecting to make a decision about that until the end of the legislative session here in the late spring or early summer. In the meantime, I am 100% focused on doing my job, so please don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime. But I wanted you to hear it from me and not from Twitter. So appreciate you all being here very much. And again, thanks to the league and thanks to Maureen for the cough drops. And for all the lessons you taught me when I was in the Boy Scouts.
Janice.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your excellent questions. I wanted to circle back a little bit to the transparency issue. We've seen it year after year. There are different ways that transparency has been reduced. When I sort of made an offhand mention about the budget, we just do not have budget transparency in this state anymore. So any Republicans or anybody else you want to complain to about that you deserve to know where your tax dollars are going would be great. There has been a constant degradation in terms of the ability to actually look at what government is spending money on and why it's doing it. There have been a couple of attempts to kneecap the auditor. He's unable to really get into the school voucher system to see what's going on. Again, we deserve to know where our tax dollars are going and and how they're being spent. When they pushed through the boards and commissions reform last year, that was another way to take away many Iowans' voices and reduce transparency. A lot of boards and commissions went away. That's fewer Iowa voices and in many ways less transparency. And one other much more specific example that we dealt with just this past week had to do with the Medicaid and putting additional requirements on Medicaid bill that we're about to get bounced back to the Senate. It went through the Senate, then to the House. Now the House added an amendment, is coming back to the Senate. But when we looked at the bill, we said, well, we don't want to debate this until we see a fiscal note from the Legislative Services Agency, the nonpartisan group that does all this work. It's because we don't know how much it's going to cost to set up this system. We don't know if it may cost actually more to set up the system than you will gain in savings from it. And so we pushed on the notion of a fiscal note. And when we got the fiscal note, it was like a fiscal note in name only. No fault of LSA, no fault of the Legislative Services Agency. They asked Department of Health and Human Services, and it sits in their notes, a number of times. They got no answer. We have senators who asked Health and Human Services a number of times. They got no answer. So what they ended up resorting to in the note was saying, well, in Arkansas, here's how much it cost. And in Georgia, here's how much it cost. But we're not Arkansas and we're not Georgia. And if we're going to be passing consequential legislation in Iowa, we deserve to have real numbers from the executive branch because we, the legislature, are a separate branch of government. Thank you all for coming.
I believe, Dave, you're up next by seniority.
Just
going to drive that in.
We're also going by hair length.
Well, after this session, if I had hair, I'd just tear it out anyway. So it doesn't matter. Thank you again for the forum today. It's been extremely helpful to be back home with you and hear what issues affect you the most. Also, if you have a moment today, could you each send Zabner an email saying we all said nice things about him?
I think I'm the only one that actually did.
You said nice things, but we didn't counter it.
There you go.
So
there you go. Yeah.
That's pretty good too.
Yep.
Quickly on Medicaid, the Medicaid work requirements. This is why it's a national bill, because there's already work requirements in for Medicaid and TANF families and FIP families. And those work requirements for TANF families are at 20 hours a week if the children are under 6 years old and 30 hours a week if the children are over 6 years old. Those work requirements are already in place. This seems like something you're just trying to do for, what's the word I'm looking for? Politics. Also this week in both chambers, the plans for property tax reform hit the fan. Here we go again, because I know the bill in 2013, the bill in 2017, the bill in 22 were so immensely effective. Please raise your hand if your homeowner's property taxes went down in the last 5 years. Well,
Did you sell your house
maybe one or
and
two.
move into?
Yeah. But it's ineffective. The Democrats have come up with a plan that actually does put money back in people's pocket. Currently, there's $3.75 billion sitting in the taxpayer trust fund. My idea, why not, by September of this year, have a rebate check for $1,000 for every homeowner and a rebate check for $500 for every renter. This would help families get by. This would put money in their pockets by the end of September. That's our plan. Thank you so much for today.
Me. I've got the next shortest hair. Yes, thank you again to everybody for being here and for your great, very thoughtful and at times very moving questions. Thank you to the League for coming out to North Liberty. I think one thing that is just glaringly clear here is that and I can only speak for us, but House Democrats are up there working for the people of Iowa. We're seeing culture war after culture war issue that does nothing but hurt people and make people not want to live here in this state. There's that, and then there's also the lowering of requirements for different professions, because we have a workforce shortage here in the state. And so the answer is make it easier for people to teach or to be what do we have this time? Something in the dentals, barbers. Yeah. So just like lowering standards is how we're going to fix this workforce shortage. And it's really a consumer protection issue on all of those. Plus, it's just really not that is not what's keeping people from wanting to be here. Some of the things that we talked about today, House Democrats have been working on this year, like Representative Jacoby said, property tax relief, the right to work, school, universal school lunches, making it easier for people to register to vote, workers' Bill of Rights, attendance Bill of Rights. Those are things that we are all actively working on up there that you will never hear about, because the Republican Party only wants to make sure that women and girls are protected from the boogeyman. It's gotten worse over my 9 years, Zach. That's a lot longer. It feels like a lifetime. It's gotten a lot worse over the 9 years that I've been there, and I worry that it's only going to continue to do that. And so just in closing, I sit directly behind Judd Lawler, and I will be asking him where he was today.
Eleanor.
Thank you. Thank you to the League for hosting the forum, and to all the co-sponsoring organizations for the incredible work that y'all are doing. I know there are folks who could not be here today because they are doing that work today. I hope that we keep hearing from you all. And I really meant it when I said, don't assume we know, because there are sometimes genuinely bills where if I don't sit on the committee that the bill went through, when it comes up for debate, I haven't heard from anyone in the district yet. And so if you have a perspective, if a bill is going to impact you, even if you just assume we're going to agree with you, let us know, and let us know when it comes to your mind. We try to be as accessible as possible via email, sometimes I get folks sending me a social media request because that's what's convenient for them. They'll send me a Facebook Messenger comment on a bill because that's what's convenient for them. And if that is what works, great. I'm really going to be spending a lot of my time over the next month paying close attention to the education budget and the bad policy ideas that might get tacked on to the education budget this year. We've seen that in the past, in my time in the legislature. We've seen a lot of these bills that we think are dead pop back up as amendments, particularly weird policy amendments on the budgets. That's something I'm going to be keeping an eye out for, and hopefully we'll let folks know if there's a moment where we really need to jump into action and speak out against something. So thank you all so much for paying attention. take breaks, drink water, take care of yourselves.
So I'd like to just close by saying thank you to the people who are here today, as well as those who are watching on Facebook. We appreciate your interest. And to the people that you can't see behind the glass, the North Liberty Technology staff, thanks for recording and for live streaming on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of the forum will be run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV, and you can see their sites for programming. And I have one final announcement for you. We want to let you know that the League is sponsoring another program related to our topic this morning. It will be on Thursday, April 3rd at the Iowa City Public Library from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. And in this program, a clinical professor of law and director of the UI Immigration Clinic, Bram Elias, and Jeannie Schmidt, the executive director of the Free Medical Clinic, are going to be discussing legal and medical issues facing immigration in Johnson County. So that should be a very informative session as well. Thank you again to our legislators for coming and for working on our behalf. And thank you all for being here today. Have a great weekend.